War of the Worlds Retelling Chapter 11. I said before that my intense feelings tend to wear me out. Later, I realized I was cold and wet with water on the stairs. I got up and went to the dining room to have some whiskey and changed my clothes. Then I went to my study upstairs. But I don't know why. The window in my study was left open when we left in a rush. It looks out over the trees and railway towards Horsell Common. The passage to my study was dark, and it seemed even darker compared to the picture outside the window. I stopped in the doorway. The thunderstorm had ended. The Oriental College and the pine trees around it were gone, and I could see the common near the sand pits far away. There were huge, strange black shapes moving around in the red light. It looked like there was a fire in the distance, with lots of small fires moving and swaying on a hillside. Smoke from the fires would sometimes blow across the window and block my view of the Martian shapes outside. I couldn't see what they were doing or recognize the black objects they were working with. I also couldn't see the closer fire, but I could see reflections of it on the walls and ceiling of the room. There was a strong smell of burning in the air. I closed the door quietly and walked towards the window. As I got closer, I could see more of the view. On one side, I could see houses near Woking Station, and on the other side, I could see the burned pine woods of Byfleet. There was a light down the hill near the railway arch, and some houses on the Maybury Road and near the station were on fire. I was confused by the light on the railway at first because there was a dark heap and a bright glare, and then a row of yellow rectangles. I realized it was a train wreck with the front part destroyed and on fire, but the back part was still on the rails. Between the three main sources of light, the burning houses, the train, and the county towards Chaba, there were patches of dark country with some dimly glowing and smoking ground. It was a strange sight, with the dark expanse full of fire. At first, I couldn't see any people, even though I looked carefully for them. Later on, I saw several black figures running one after the other across the railway line near Woking Station. I had been living in a small and safe world for many years, but now everything was chaos and on fire. I still didn't know what had happened in the past 7 hours, or how the big machines I saw related to the strange lumps that came out of the cylinder. I felt a strange interest in what was happening and turned my chair to the window to watch the blackened country and the three giant black machines moving back and forth around the sand pits. They looked very busy, and I wondered what they were doing. Were they machines with intelligence? I thought that was impossible, or maybe there was a Martian controlling each machine, like how a human brain controls a body. I started to compare the machines to human-made ones and wondered how they would look to a smart animal that didn't know anything about machines. After the storm, the sky was clear and the planet Mars was setting in the west. At that moment, a soldier came into the narrator's garden. The narrator heard a sound of scraping at the fence and saw the soldier climbing over it. The sight of another human being made the narrator alert, and he leaned out of the window. He whispered "hist" to the soldier, who hesitated for a moment before crossing the lawn to the corner of the house. He then bent down and walked softly. The soldier came into the garden and climbed over the fence. When I saw him, I asked him where he was going and if he was trying to hide. He whispered that he was, so I invited him into my house. I unlocked the door and let him in. He was upset and didn't say much at first, but I poured him a drink and he said they had been wiped out. He followed me into the dining room. He drank the whiskey, then sat down at the table, put his head on his arms, and started crying like a little boy. I stood beside him, wondering why he was so upset, even though I had just been feeling the same way. It took a while before he was calm enough to answer my questions, and even then he spoke unclearly and with many pauses. He was a driver in the artillery and had only started fighting at about 7 o'clock. At that time, there was shooting happening on the common, and people said that the first group of Martians were moving slowly toward their second cylinder, using a metal shield as cover. Later, a metal shield appeared on tripod legs and became the first fighting machine he had seen. The soldier was a driver in the artillery and had arrived at the sand pits to command them. But, as he was maneuvering the gun, his horse fell into a hole, and the gun exploded behind him. The ammunition blew up, and there was fire all around him. He found himself lying under dead bodies and horses, scared and injured across his back. He stayed still, lying under the dead horse until he felt better. He said it was like a parade. And then suddenly there was stumbling, banging, and swishing. He said they were wiped out, the soldier repeated. He hid under the dead horse for a long time and cautiously looked out across the common. The Cardigan men tried to attack the pit in small groups, but they were quickly destroyed. Then the enormous machine stood up and walked around the common, slowly and calmly, among the few survivors. Its hood-like head turned around just like a person wearing a hood. It had a metal box in one of its arms that had green flashes of light, and from the top of the box came a beam of heat. After a few minutes, the soldier saw that there was no one left alive on the common. Everything that was not already burnt was now on fire. The hussars were not in sight, and the Martians had stopped making noise. The giant Martian machine spared the town of Woking and its houses until the end, when it suddenly attacked with its powerful heat ray and set everything on fire. Then the machine turned away from the soldier and started moving towards the nearby pine woods, where the second cylinder was located. As it moved away, another large machine emerged from the pit, shining brightly in the sunlight. The second creature followed the first one, and the artilleryman started crawling very carefully across the hot burnt heather towards Horsell. He managed to get into a ditch by the side of the road and escaped to Woking. He told his story quickly and briefly. Woking was in chaos. There were a few survivors who were desperate and many were injured from burns. He was forced to take cover from the fire and hide among the rubble of a broken wall as one of the Martian monsters returned. He saw it capture a man, pick him up with its metallic tentacles, and slam his head against the trunk of a pine tree. Finally, after it got dark, the artilleryman made a run for it and crossed over the railway embankment. After escaping from the Martians, the soldier had been trying to make his way towards Maybury, hoping to head towards London in safety. He heard that people were hiding in trenches and cellars, and others had fled to Woking and Sen. He was very thirsty and found a broken water main that was bubbling water onto the road. He told me his story bit by bit, and as he spoke, we kept the room dark so as not to attract the attention of the Martians. I found some food for him to eat, as he had not eaten anything since midday. As he spoke, we could see things outside the window, and it seemed that something had trampled the bushes and rose trees on the lawn. We both looked haggard and tired, as if we had gone through a lot. After we finished eating, we went quietly upstairs to my study. I looked out of the open window and saw that the valley had turned into a valley of ashes in just one night. The fires were smaller now and there was smoke instead of flames. The destroyed houses, trees, and ruins were now visible in the merciless light of the dawn. However, some objects managed to escape the destruction, such as a white railway signal and the end of a greenhouse. This kind of widespread destruction had never been seen before in any war. 3 metallic giants stood near the pit, rotating their cowls as if observing the destruction they caused. The giants shone in the growing light of the east. I thought the pit had gotten bigger, and every so often, bright green smoke would shoot up from it and disappear into the sky. In the distance, I could see the fires around Chobham, which had turned into columns of smoky, red clouds as the sun began to rise.